It's pretty nice.
Yeah, we had a thunderstorm overnight, but it's climbing to 80 now. We'll hit 90 by Friday.
Nice. Yeah, Rob is in another meeting with Jim Watson, so hopefully he'll be joining us very shortly.
Is just about everybody on the IT staff working from home?
Yeah, all of us.
Cool. Now that's a great avatar.
Ooh, recording has started. This could be fun.
Yeah, no pressure.
Except we have to be careful what we say.
It'll forever live in infamy from now on.
I don't know. You got a hard act to follow, man. Brett put together a slideshow presentation and demos and all kinds of stuff. So counting on you.
I'm giving everybody free lunch after this, or free lunch in the future at least.
Oh, you won.
We're waiting on 2 more people, and we'll get started.
Okay.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. We've got everybody. We'll go ahead and kick this off. I'd like to introduce Robert. Rob is our development lead, development manager for the consumer channel applications team, the other team that I work with up here in Nashville. Rob and James hold the same title, development manager. I've let Rob know that we are converting over to JIRA later this week. Our first sprint's going to start next Monday. We had the opportunity for Brett to come in and give us a BA perspective. I spent an hour with us going over kind of what he does as a BA, a little bit of the SDLC from his perspective, the different types of issues, a very general overview kind of what takes place on his end. I've asked Rob to come in and give you guys a perspective from the developer side in JIRA. What happens during the sprint, kind of how they move things around, creating subtasks, assigning things like that, kind of all the basics. So I'm not going to take up any more time. I have opened up the chat box in this meeting. So if you have a question or need him to stop, just toss it up in there and we will jump on it. So Rob, this is the ATK team and it's all you.
All right. Thank you very much. Hi, guys. Nice to meet all of you. It's nice here in Nashville, but I'm sure you guys have much better weather on the norm. So, yeah, you guys already walked through, Jordan, you said you guys walked through like creating a story and that sort of thing. So I've just mocked up a test issue that I'm going to do on our backlog and our process. And kind of step through what we would do throughout, not only in a sprint if we were pulling something in, but also kind of feeding into what Brett would have done of when we're getting a story ready through that entire process. So Jordan, stop me if you guys have heard this, and we can jump past it, or anybody feel free to step up at any point and ask questions, and I'll be more than happy to answer them for you guys. So I've just got a story mocked up here. Just a regular story. This would be like something we found during a sprint that we'd want to create. So I'm going to create that, and initially it'll go to the top of the backlog. we organize our backlog a little bit differently than most right now, where we're keeping mostly everything near the top of the backlog, and after that, things have kind of fallen off. But normally, the top of the backlog is going to be a nice, hefty piece of information or workload of information that are ready to be grabbed in case anything, in case anybody is done with their work in the sprint. So right now, I'm going to just pull this one into the sprint as if I was going to work it. And you can do that one of two ways. You can either click and drag, or in the issue itself, you can also send to this is our current sprint right now. And this will have a list of anything that is currently open. Jordan, I think you're going to try and keep it down to just one sprint being active at a time, I would assume.
Yes.
So when you do this, it'll pop up this thing. And what this is to let not only you know, but anybody else that needs to be notified of this, like Jordan or like James, that you're pulling something in that, you know, we've committed to a certain amount of work in a sprint. And these are the things, this is what's going to be affected if you do this, perform this action. So I'm just going to say, okay, I want to pull it in, but I haven't assigned it to anybody yet. So I can do that a couple different ways. Underneath the stories, if you go to edit them, we have a couple different options in here. Oh, it's actually not available on this page. But over here, we have what's called people section, and I can actually, this is the assignee that is designated to a story, and it can be passed around from person to person, whether or not that is a developer or a BA resource. There are also additional ones of these that we have in JIRA that are shared among the teams, where there can be a QA, a specific QA assignee. That doesn't actually pass the story to them. So if I have this story assigned to me, and we go in and assign a BA or QA to it, the story is still mine right now. And anything, any activity that goes on to it is my responsibility. But so then once I've assigned it to myself, if we go over here to active sprints, now I'll see that since I just pulled it in, let me minimize the rest of our team here. There's also a quick button up top here that will only show your issues. So you can see now if I open, oh, I've created a bunch of these, that's why they show as mine. But it's in this leftmost column right here because it is open. We haven't done anything with it yet. We haven't assigned a story point value to it, which you would do with a sizing with the team. We haven't moved it into to do. So there's inside each of these stories, depending on what type it is, they each come with their own unique workflows. So for a typical story, this is the lovely workflow. As soon as it comes up, this is the lovely workflow that is standard across all of our JIRA teams right now. And you can actually hover over each of these steps and see what is necessary for it to move to the next step. So looking at this middle path right here, the most common path, there's some BA analysis that goes on. It goes into grooming, and then the team would size it, and it moves into the to-do column. Once in the to-do column, you can see there are a lot more options for where it goes, but we're going to stick with the continuing straight through. So I'm going to move this through analysis, and we're going to put a point size on it, which is normally what happened in the groom stage. So I would say, okay, I'm ready for analysis. It'll go ahead and move it forward for me. And then you can see that because the workflow, groom is now my only option to move it forward. And then obviously there are BA tasks that are being done at each step here. So Brett or another BA would be adding more information as the team, not necessarily the whole team, but somebody looks at the story, figures out what needs to be added along the way, and then move into sizing. And that would be, okay, we're going to go and say this is we'll put a 5 in here for story points. And so now story points have shown up on my screen. And some of these fields on here are only available once you've put size, or once you've actually put information into them. So that's why story points wasn't there previously. And now that it's sized, I'm ready to go ahead and move forward with this. So again, this would be a story that we have figured out that we need to pull into the sprint. So, either a production issue or something that we need to deal with in flight. So this would all happen very quickly where, we'd get with the team and we'd say, okay, Monday morning, Tuesday morning, here's a story. We've got some information from our BAs or our QAs. Let's get a size on it. Team gets together and size it. All right, I'm going to take this now and I'm going to work it. So I move it into development. And now I'll jump back to our active sprints. And because I moved it into development, it's now in the in progress lane in here. From there, normal process, do code review, check your changes in so that other people can see them. And then we would move it through to code review. One thing that we also do on our team, that we've started to do, is adding a code comment in to the actual JIRA story. The reason for that, it's not the same as a commit code or a commit message for actual TFS or Git code, but this allows us to give some more color on what we changed as far as if it didn't meet the description exactly. So if this was a bug about a payment screen, maybe the change actually occurred in another area. And so what this allows us to do is this allows us better tracking to say, made change in processing service. Just so that we have better tracking all the way through if we ever need to come back to this story and say, oh, this was, we had this issue before, what really was it? We can see that tied out right here. And so I'd say, okay, I made a change here. I'm ready for this to go to code review. So I'd go ahead and move it through to code review. It allows you at that time also to make the same comment. And if we're ready to assign it to a version, a release at this point, we can. Jordan, I don't know what you guys are going to do with that. You probably have a little bit more discussion on how you guys want to handle releases. But the nice thing is JIRA allows you to add these comments throughout the entire process to really close in, confine, what happened throughout the entire thing. So we'll go ahead and move it through to code review. And at this point, somebody would be reviewing the code check-in, whatever standards, are around that. And then we'd say, okay, it's either complete or ready to move right to testing. There is a step in this workflow where the code review needs to go back to development instead of going to testing. And so that would be what the code review complete is we found something in it, we want to send it back for slight changes or big changes, whichever one, but it needs to go back to the developer for that. At this point, our entire process does not change who the assignee is. We keep this assignee as the developer who, as long as a person didn't need to be out of the office or offload that whole story to somebody else, we keep the assignee as whoever is the developer that is responsible for that code. And that's why we've created this code review column here so that we can easily see who or how many of these code reviews we have on our entire team, so we know how much of our resources we need to devote to looking at those code reviews. And this also shows, who has done a lot of their work and could be freed up to do other code reviews for people. But let's say the code review went well. We're going to go ahead and push it through to testing. And again, each of these. Yep.
Real quick, Rob, we had a question come up. How do you designate who does the code review?
So on our team, we have a small team which looks to be similar in size. Every morning, we don't track who does code reviews at all from a percentage standpoint, but every morning the reason that this column was created is so that we can see how we're doing as a team on rolling code reviews. And it really is a benefit to the team to do those. We have a rule that we actually have set up in our Git where 2 people have to approve a particular check-in before that code can be committed into the development branch. That may not be the same thing that you want to do as a team. We found that was a good number just to make sure we get a couple of eyes on it. And we also encourage anybody that has a question, even if they don't understand the code, to put that question in, because somebody else may have not thought of that, or may be thinking the same thing and just not want to ask. And so it doesn't take long usually for those questions to get answered. But we still leave it open in most situations, unless it's something where we need to get it pushed through really quickly, and then we will send a message out to the team and say, hey, I really need this particular code review looked at right now. We don't force those with the team. The team has done a pretty good job for the most part of picking those up and finding time throughout their day to devote to specifically sitting down and looking at other people's changes. Most of our developers are also very, it's not that our 2 is a hard number, but more people could look at them. But most of the time, once one of our developers has seen that 2 people have checked their story and accepted it, they are very quick to move it along, because they want to get that out of their queue and into QA's hands at that time. Sorry, I don't want to. I never like the thing of having this this whole screen up, so I don't want to look at. Oh wait, no, you guys can only see the one screen right now. Okay. Okay, just making sure that that question got answered fully. So let's see, back to here. So now that we're in testing, QA would be going through and doing their piece. And the same thing applies to code reviews at this point. If there is an issue found, they can, well, let's go the other route first. QA is not necessarily needed. So when we create our stories, if we know as a developer that it's going to be something that either we're going to test or there really is no test pattern for it, we try to use these labels sparingly, because they're not the best way to filter things, but they are a great last resort. So we would use something like dev test to signify that this doesn't need to go through QA at all. And once we move it to testing, we would just click this not needed button, and it would get pushed through to, I believe, to cancel. Let's reopen it. The nice thing about JIRA is you can, at any point with these workflows, you can get them back to a working state. So if you've accidentally moved it through to done or accidentally canceled a ticket, you can still bring it right back through to show what the true state of the ticket is at that time. So I'm going to push just right through to testing. And then let's say it wasn't dev test, and we found the QA's found an issue with it. So what this is going to do is this is going to create, Jordan, do you know if this is the part that creates the iteration bug, or do they create those themselves?
I believe that's a separate issue they create.
Okay, so this would be the same.
The script goes into a comment, yeah.
Yeah, this would be the same as creating a comment. And Jordan, I'm going to leave a lot of this up to you for how that particular process is going to go. But this would be the same as your completion notes, where QA would put in, okay, here's the steps to replicate that I found. Here's this issue. Hopefully there's only one issue, but here are all the things that I found while I was checking through. The nice things about these comments are, if you are the assignee, you're going to get emails anytime anybody puts a comment in on something. You can also optionally tag anybody you want, and they will get a comment or an email signifying that they were notified, they're getting notified that you are calling them out somewhere. So that would be if you clicked issue found. And then obviously we have other workflows in here. After we complete our testing, we decide if it needs to be demoed to the business or not. Same thing with testing, where we have some tickets that need to be demoed and some tickets that are background changes that there is nothing to the demo to do. So if it's a SQL ticket, there's nothing we're going to be needing to do there. So once we get into demo stage, again, another place to enter any notes you may have. And it would sit here until the demo occurred. And then eventually we'd say, okay, we are ready to release it to production. And once we're ready for production, that's where we would come through and say, and this is where Jordan is going to jump in at some point, but we'd have these releases. We have a release TBD because we're not sure when some tickets are released, but we don't want to lose sight of them once they are done. So right now, when we don't have a release for something, once it goes through demo, we're like, okay, business has signed off on it. Cool. Here's everything that we have that we're just waiting for. And once we create a release, then we can go back through some of these and slot them into the specific date and time that they're going to be released. And for now, their code is sitting there, but they're not getting pulled into anything. I know Jordan specifically mentioned subtasks. So one of the great things, we have separate teams that we need to reach out to for integrations with SQL, with another service called Cache, with some other third-party things that we need help with when we implement things. Subtasks are a great way to deal with that. So we have our main story right here, but maybe I need Jordan to, release SQL change. And this will assign this to him, and I would say run this script. And subtasks work just like stories, tasks, except they are parent-child attached to this particular thing. So I could attach a SQL script here, just like the other one, and say, okay. And now, whenever I come into this story, I see a subtask down here that tells me other things that need to be done other than just this story. As long as I've been using JIRA, I've seen teams use this in a number of ways. When I first started using JIRA, we would create, the BAs would create all the stories, and we'd go through sizing and grooming and our planning. And then when we were ready to start our sprint, the first thing we would do when starting our sprint was we would sit down as developers with the stories that we had gotten assigned or grabbed, and we would actually subtask out what we thought the tasks were going to be. So if I had a story to build a new screen, I know I need to go add that screen. Another task would be I need to go and generate the data that I'm going to present on that screen, and I also need to generate a save function for that screen. And so I'd put those three things down as tasks, and then I would work through each of those individually. It really is up to the team to kind of figure out what works best for the team, because that is a little extra work up front, but not only for the team, but also for the manager and the delivery manager, is it provides everybody a little bit more clarity into what's going on. And it also allows you to share work a little easier too, where if somebody is getting their work done faster, or if somebody has a much larger story, if you've broken it out into subtasks and somebody finishes a little early and says, hey, I've got extra time, you can say, cool, can you go grab these two subtasks? Instead of needing to pair program with them or something like that, it's much easier to hand that work off at that point. Does anybody have any questions about subtasking or moving the stories through the process? Again, this JIRA process right now has been created, and it's being kept standard for the entirety of LKQ right now, but we are looking to make changes based off of how we use it in the first year or two.
Yeah, this is James. Now, one thing with these subtasks is if you go back to the active sprints, it will show up as a separate issue on there that you can actually see.
Yes.
With whoever's it assigned, and so we've got that. And when you're filtering by a person, until it's in the, I think, to do column, it won't actually show up. So this is in a state that won't filter by the person if you're just trying to look for open issues or active issues by that person. So, and then how he was clicking on those buttons at the top to move it to in progress, to code review and whatnot, you can just drag them here too, and it'll only let you drop it in. You notice how the other ones highlight? You can't take that and put it in testing or demo because it's not an approved path from the starting location.
Yep.
One thing we use Subtask a lot for too is if we have a story that a developer's working on that they need SQL support, they'll actually create the subtask and assign it to Stanley. You guys know Stanley. And then it shows up on his bar of stuff to do, and it's automatically tagged to that story. Everything's linked up, and it works very well that way. Carl and Scott, when you guys are doing the EDI stuff, this is going to be a great way for you to differentiate work. If we need someone else on the team or another team to help us out, this is a great application of it.
One thing that we've started to do just in the last 3 weeks, probably, or something that we have found, I don't know that the team has actually actively used it yet, but our DBAs, Stanley does an amazing job of when we assign these, when we get to a release night and we give him the list of stories, he does a great job of coming in here and saying, okay, I can, you can do an issue search at the, oops, I don't want to do current, but you can do an issue search at the top. And he goes through and he finds all these, all these issues that we're releasing, and he sees if they have any subtasks for him. The other thing that we have started doing is when you create an issue in JIRA, not only when you create it, but you can also edit this at a later time, you can put an implementation plan in here, any notes that you need for what you're going to need to do when this is released. And so we've started to put in here, needs DBA support, or our other system is called needs cache, or, any notes, will run SQL script at or after 9 p.m. or something like that, because we know that the process itself needs to have this particular function attached to it. So this is a really nice area to just keep track of all that stuff if you know it at the time, or building it into the daily process of the Scrum meeting of just reminding everybody on the team, hey, that sounds like something we need to remember at release time. Let's go ahead and throw that into the implementation plan notes. And going back to the releases, once you've added everything to a release, let's imagine that this release TBD was an actual release, I can quickly see in here all my stories that are going to be going, and I can click into each of them and say, okay, do I have any any implementation plan information in here that I need to know about outside of it's just a standard, we're going to push code for this particular thing. What other questions do you guys have? Or comments, James or Jordan?
I mean, I want to put out to the team, I says, like this Sightline app is a lot different than any of the other apps that the teams are working with, since all of our processing is done through SQL. So,
okay.
We would have a lot of that. I'm currently looking into how we can integrate better with source control, so that we don't have to do what's been done in the past as far as not checking into source safe until after it's been moved to production. Because doing it that way, there's no way to really have someone else take a look at it unless you provide them the file, and then they compare what you provided in the file against what is currently in TFS. So some of that is going to be different for how we handle things, but we do want to do code reviews on our issues. When we make changes, we want to have that at least a second set of eyes look at it and make sure that we aren't doing something stupid, that we're not causing issues somewhere else that we didn't think about, that someone else may be able to catch, knows that, oh, well, this gets called from here, and if we do this, it may mess up something else. So that's the whole idea behind the code review, is getting those type of issues done.
Also,
yeah.
Rob, could you speak to logging work?
Yes. So you can see over here that this story has had a lot of 1 day, 6 hours and 30 minutes logged to it. So there's a couple different ways to log work. The most common is to just when you're on a story to click more and click log time. This will allow you to spot add time. We don't change the time, the actual worked time down to the minute or even the hour. So I would just say that I worked, 3 hours. Oops. 3 hours on this story. It's going to auto adjust this. Jordan, I don't believe that this right now, we care about this for an auditing perspective at all.
You're correct.
But this will just tell me, okay, I've worked 3 hours. One of the other important things about this is this gives me the opportunity to say, okay, I've worked on this for 3 hours. I think I have 12 hours left. The 12 hours is not something that is is looked at from I put 12 hours, today, and then after the ticket was done, we realized that, instead of 15 hours total, it actually had, 1 day and 6 hours logged to it as opposed to 15 hours. This is to give everybody a large idea of if you are the developer working that and there is something else that you may need to work on, either how long is left on that it will be until you can get that, or can we push off this 12 hours left right now since this seems like a lot of work to do and move on to something else. So this just gives everybody a little bit better idea, again, with the comments and the other pieces of where the story is at, subtasks, of knowing holistically how a story is doing, or where everybody's at and if they need help or if they're available to help other people. There's a lot of tools that JIRA offers for that. If you're not going to log time this way, the other way is tempo, correct, Jordan?
Correct.
Yep. Yeah, I was going to ask you to go to this to show them the other way to enter it, where you can enter it on a weekly basis or at the end of the day or whatever.
Yep. Oh. So on this one, you can actually do two things. You can log your time, which would give you something similar to what we just had. You'd search for your issue. The other thing this allows you to do is plan out time. So you can see here, a typical workday for a developer is 6 hours worth of work based on lunches and meetings and general water cooler talk. But this also allows you to say, okay, I know that I have, my tickets that I just took under. I think that either looking forward or looking backwards, I think on Thursday that I'm going to be able to go and work on, CCA. I don't think we have that one yet. I'm going to go and work on the CCA 744, and I think I'm going to do 4 hours of that one. And then I'm going to go do 4 hours of another one, or 2 hours of another one, to kind of ballpark out what it would look like for me for the rest of the week. The nice thing the plan time thing does is it saves you from, it's easy to convert that plan time into work time later on. And you don't have to remember to go back and do that retroactively. But this,
How often do you log time, and why is it important, Rob?
I log time daily, Jordan. It is, I've done it a couple different ways throughout the time I've been working with JIRA. I've actually had, when I first started using JIRA, I had a little Google Timer app that every hour it would beep at me, and I would just go in and log time to the stories because at the time I wasn't just working on one task. I was doing support and tasks, so I would have a couple, IMs or something, and I'd have to go remember to log stuff in 15-minute increments to a different story. I would say, rule of thumb, at least do it once a day. Because I don't know about you guys, but my brain gets foggy from, if it's Friday and I'm trying to do this at 4:15 before I want to leave, I'm not going to remember what I did Tuesday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's better to have accurate readings of time spent on which stories, so that the business can understand what is being worked on and how long that is actually taking the development team. It's, to most people, it's a double-edged sword, but it's a good thing because it provides them a clear description of what's going on currently right now with my teams, and I need to notify somebody that, you know, we're taking more time than we thought on this particular piece. So let me go talk to those stakeholders and let them know, because I can see the screen. Let them know that I think it's going to take a little bit more time, as opposed to us getting further down the path and them asking, hey, this should have been completed 2 weeks ago. You know, what's the story? Or 3 weeks ago, what's the story? This just gives everybody a better idea on what is actively being worked, and where your time is going to, as opposed to, yeah, I was just doing development all day today for my whole time.
Any other
Jordan,
questions for Rob?
do you have people actually do the submission of this?
I'm sorry, what do you mean by the submission?
Like,
oh, no,
there's
we don't
okay.
do that. No.
Okay, I didn't think so. I just wanted to make sure. But yeah, as far as moving stories through or creating stories or anything like that, do you guys have any questions on those?
Can you talk a little bit about components?
So we service a larger number of apps than normal, about 15 to 20. And so each of our components, when we go in here to, where's my create issue? Each of our apps that we support has its own component, because some of our stories may cross the streams, for Ghostbusters terms, of what we need to do. So we may have a consumer channel story that we need to use, you know, our order microservice, our product microservice, and our user microservice. And all what this will do is this lets us know, both from a reporting standpoint, and we really find use out of it from a code standpoint for releases. Again, when I'm on this release tab, I can go through each of these and see, okay, this code base is the PYP public site. That means if I'm releasing this one tomorrow, I need to go and make sure that I have a release built for that in the pipeline, and actually get a firm handle on all the things that this is touching. Now, that does require the developers, as they're going through things, because, you know, when we're planning or when we're grooming this stuff, we don't always know exactly where changes need to occur. So that does require the developers to, while they're actively working on things, to say, oh, okay, I know that this was just set for car by, you know, that's one of ours, but I know it also needs to go make a change in car by mobile and update that as it goes.
This is going to help us guys a lot when, especially before we go to production and we all of a sudden realize, hey, we've got certain things touching certain things. Have we tested to make sure we're not breaking it? You know, we found a couple of issues where, you know, we realized at the time of deployment, oops, you know, we've got something that's stopping us. So components are going to be something that that I will own from a just setting them up, but obviously we'll be getting with the team and making sure that we have all the components identified. And during story creation, it's important to put in there what we have, or what we know, just like Rob said. So, and I also like the fact that Rob mentioned the labels portion of this. We use tags in TFS, and we use them very generously now. We don't need to do that anymore. There's really no tag that we need to bring over from the TFS side. Labels are scarcely used for a reason. Just like he said, it's hard to query on them because it literally, you type them different one way, you can't pull anything. So we use components, we used epics, you know, we used fixed versions, we use things that are actually hard coded in the system that we can pull for our reporting standpoint. So just to answer any questions you might have on that. But so far, Rob's doing a great job. What other questions from a development side do you guys have for him?
Yeah, like I said, I'm going on more on Jordan's component issue. We're probably going to have things like, you know, if this affects factory track in Dallas but doesn't affect factory track anywhere else, or it affects the DTX application but not another one, or this one only affects Edmonton, or it affects, you know, all but one. That's where we can use components so that when we get around to releasing it, it's a friendly reminder of, I got to update these databases. I mean, we're running with what, 15, 20 databases just to keep our application running in all the locations.
Yeah, and I would definitely, on top of that, if there are specific files that correspond to that, I would definitely use these attachments as much as you can. These are great for keeping up on the latest version of stuff as it exists in the story today. To know that not only attachments, if you need a SQL script or something like that to be run, but I've also just started, when I have communications with people in email about a story, if we don't have them in comments down here, like if I don't tag Jordan and say, hey, Jordan, here's an issue that I saw and he doesn't respond back. If we do that in email, I'll just click and drag the email over from Outlook and drop it into here so that everybody else that would look at the story can go through and find out not only exactly where the story's at, but everything that I, as the developer, have done up to this point to get to where we're at. In case I needed to be out for an extended period of time or somebody else takes the story over. Yes, I would help them, and explain that to them, but it also is a great place to just one-stop shop, just drop everything you have corresponding to it here.
Excellent point. Thank you. What else we got for Rob? Don't be shy. Okay. Well, I know James and Rob. I know you guys know each other and can communicate with each other on best practices and all that. You guys can go through me with any questions that I can't answer. I'll obviously get to James and Rob so that we can get anything out there for you. Rob, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. I know it's a busy day and helping us out with understanding JIRA a little bit more. We did record this session so that you guys can go back and look at it and maybe review it a few times. We're throwing a lot of information at you. We'll be going over a lot of this stuff and you'll see it in action obviously next week. But I think you're really going to like it. It's simple to use. The devs, I haven't heard any complaints coming out of any devs on it as far as just the flow, how things work, moving them through the channels and everything. So if no one else has any further questions. All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for your time. Rob, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And have an awesome